Have you ever, wanted to really wrap your head around one of those big political questions that everyone's talking about? You know, those things that feel like they have layers and layers to them, but you just want the straight, insightful story?
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're
Awesome.
going deep on this idea of a former president pulling off a non-consecutive third term. Could that even happen? I mean, it's a big question.
Yeah. Huge.
And we've gone through 3 posts, like 25 web pages, and a really detailed article to bring you all the key insights. So
So are you ready to dive in?
I am ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's get into it.
So the main thing we're trying to figure out is, can Donald Trump, after serving 2 terms already, one from 2017 to 2021, and then assuming his recent win in 2024 holds up another one from 2025 to 2029, could he actually try for a 3rd term as president?
Right. And it's not just like some random speculation, right?
Mhm.
This is a question about the Constitution, historical patterns, what people think, and maybe even some really creative ways to bend the rules.
Definitely. This goes way beyond just talk. It gets into the core of how our system works.
Okay, so the very first thing that comes to mind is the 22nd Amendment. That was approved back in 1951, and it's pretty clear. No one can be elected president more than 2 times.
Those are.
So it seems like right away that's a big roadblock on this whole third term idea.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The 22nd Amendment is the elephant in the room when we talk about a 3rd term. But what's really interesting is how that amendment came to be. It wasn't just out of the blue. It was a direct response to FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, serving 4 terms as president from 1932 to when he died in 45.
Oh, wow, 4 terms.
4 terms. People started feeling like having one person in charge for so long wasn't the best thing for the country.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's a long time. FDR was president through the Depression and most of World War II. I mean, it was a crazy time. But you can see how that might make people think twice about how much power one president should have.
Yeah.
And, the fact that the 22nd Amendment was approved so quickly after FDR died shows how important that idea was for everyone, no matter what party they were in.
Definitely. It was a big deal. And if we bring it back to today, we have Donald Trump. Won the presidency in 2016, did his first term, won again in 2024. If that all holds up, his 2nd term will end in January 2029, and he'll be 82 years old.
Wow.
Now, he's definitely joked about a 3rd term. Sometimes it feels like he's just playing around. Other times it's hard to tell how serious he is.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen him say both.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't talk about this whole thing without thinking about his supporters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Public opinion, especially among his base, seems really important here. They see him as this force for change, someone who needs more time to make things happen.
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely a driving force in this conversation.
And I even saw a report, I think it was from AP News back in March of this year, about supporters chanting for a 3rd term right after his 2024 win. That kind of energy, you can't just ignore that.
Absolutely. His base is a key factor. But we got to zoom out a bit, too, because there's a lot of pushback against a 3rd term as well. Polls, like one from YouGov in early 2025, showed that a lot of Americans, something like 55%, don't want to see Trump go for a 3rd term.
Oh, really? 55%?
Yeah, that's a big chunk of people. They're worried about his style, the whole January 6th situation, and what his policies could mean for the country. So we've got this split in public opinion. Some people really want it, others definitely don't.
It's like this tug of war, almost. And it's what makes this question so interesting. It's not a simple yes or no. Okay, so let's look back for a second. What does history tell us about all of this? It seems like for a long time, presidents stuck to serving just 2 terms.
Yeah, that's basically right. It all started with George Washington. He decided to step down after 2 terms.
Oh, so there was no rule.
No formal rule, not back then. But his choice was really important. It set this powerful example. He was worried about too much power in one person's hands, so he walked away. And that's what presidents did for a long time. Even without a rule, they followed that unwritten tradition.
Okay, so it was like an unspoken agreement or something.
Pretty much, yeah.
Interesting. But didn't a few presidents try for a 3rd term? I feel like I remember hearing about that.
You're right. There were a few who tried. Ulysses S. Grant tried to run again in 1880 after being out of office for a bit, but even his own party didn't really support it. And Theodore Roosevelt, he also stepped away after 2 terms, but then came back in 1912, ran as a progressive, but he ended up losing to Woodrow Wilson.
Oh, so it did happen.
It did happen. But even before the 22nd Amendment officially existed, the idea of going for more than 2 terms was controversial. Like, people weren't really on board.
So it seems like, for the most part, everyone followed the 2-term tradition. But then we get to FDR, and he kind of breaks that pattern, wins 4 terms. And that's why, as we've been talking about, we now have the 22nd Amendment. And it's important to remember that after that amendment was put in place in 1951, every single president has followed the two-term limit.
Exactly. That's the key takeaway here. The 22nd Amendment is a direct result of FDR's 4 terms. It's a way to ensure no president can hold power for that long again. But then we come to the really tricky but kind of fascinating part.
Yeah.
What about legal loopholes?
Oh, this is where it gets good.
Yeah, this is where we get into some theories. Given Donald Trump's history of, pushing the boundaries and challenging norms, it's not surprising that people are coming up with ideas, even if they're far-fetched, about how he could maybe get around the 22nd Amendment. And a lot of these ideas focus on one word in the amendment: elected.
Well, that's interesting. Just that one word.
Yep, that one word opens up a lot of debate.
So how could someone be president for a third term without being elected? I mean, I feel like that's the whole point of the job.
Well, one of the ideas that's been floating around is something called the vice president succession theory.
Okay, what's that?
It actually popped up in a Law Review article back in 1999. It's definitely creative. The basic idea is that Trump could run for VP, vice president, instead of president. His running mate would then become president, and then the new president would just immediately resign.
Oh, wow.
That way, Trump would become president again without technically being elected to the office for a third time. It's kind of like a legal relay race. The new president takes the oath and then immediately hands the baton to Trump.
I mean, that's pretty clever, but does anyone actually think that could work?
Well, what's interesting is that Trump himself kind of hinted that there might be ways around the 22nd Amendment. In a Meet the Press interview back in March 2025, he talked about these methods.
The methods.
Yeah, he didn't go into details or anything, but he also didn't deny it outright, which got people thinking, right?
That's so interesting. So is there anything stopping someone from doing that?
Well, the problem is the 12th Amendment. This amendment lays out how we elect the president and the VP. And there's a part in there that's really important. It says that anyone who can't be president constitutionally also can't be VP.
Oh, so you can't just sidestep it that easily.
Not really, no. Legal experts like Lawrence Tribe have argued that this pretty much shuts down the whole VP succession idea. If the 22nd Amendment says Trump can't be elected president again, the 12th Amendment basically says he can't be VP either. It's like a double lock on the door. And Tribe even said that he doesn't think the Supreme Court would even consider this whole VP theory seriously.
So it seems like that's a dead end then.
Pretty much, yeah. Although there are other legal scholars, like Michael Klarman, who think it might not be so cut and dry. They argue that because of some recent Supreme Court decisions, things might be a bit more up in the air now than they used to be. The court's been making some rulings about presidential power, and that could make how they interpret these amendments a bit less predictable. So maybe, just maybe, there's a tiny bit of wiggle room.
So you're saying there's a chance?
It's a very slim chance. I wouldn't put any money on it.
Okay, so the VP route is probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
But what about changing the Constitution itself? I think I remember something about a proposal in Congress to do just that.
You're right. In January 2025, a representative from Tennessee, Andy Ogles, he's a Republican, introduced a resolution to change the 22nd Amendment.
Oh, wow, a resolution to change the Constitution. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. His idea was to allow presidents to have 3 terms, but they couldn't be back-to-back. So you could serve 2 terms, sit out for a while, and then come back for a third.
That would kind of solve this whole dilemma, wouldn't it? But could that actually happen? I mean, changing the Constitution, that's not an easy thing to do, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. It's really, really hard to change the Constitution. It needs a supermajority vote in both the House and the Senate, and then 3/4 of all the states have to say yes, too. That's 38 out of 50 states. And the way things are now, with so much division in politics, it's pretty unlikely that that kind of amendment would actually pass. Experts say it's more of a what if than a real possibility.
So even though there's a way to do it, it's not likely to happen.
It's like winning the lottery. It's possible, but don't count on it.
Got it. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. What about Trump's approach in general? You know, when it comes to rules and norms in politics, he doesn't always play by the book.
Yeah, he's definitely got his own style.
He's suggested some pretty unconventional things before, like redoing his first term, which, isn't a thing. And in 2025, he made those comments about not joking about a third term. While it wasn't a direct statement or anything, it definitely keeps that possibility on the table for his supporters and maybe even tests the waters a little bit.
For sure, he's always testing boundaries. And it's not just Trump himself. Some of his allies are openly talking about a third term, too. Steve Bannon, for example, he's predicted a potential run in 2028. And then you have loyalists like Representative Ogles who are actively trying to find legal ways to make it happen, even if those ways are super long shots. So there's a real effort to make this idea stick around.
There's also this very, very unlikely scenario where he just refuses to leave office in 2029. It sounds crazy, but after everything that happened with January 6th, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
I'll be honest, that's probably the most extreme possibility. If a president refused to leave office, it would cause a huge constitutional crisis. But the other parts of government, like the military, the courts, Congress, they would have to step in and make sure the Constitution is followed. It would be a massive mess. So if Trump were to try for a third term, it's way more likely that he would use his support and his political influence to pressure the system, to try to find legal or political ways to make it happen.
So at the end of the day, this whole question is really about a fundamental tension in our democracy. On one side, there are people who truly believe that Trump is such a unique and necessary leader that he needs more time to actually get everything done.
Right. They think he's the only one who can do the job.
Then on the other side, you have people who think that a third term would be really dangerous, that it could undermine our whole system. They see the 22nd Amendment as this crucial protection against one person holding on to power for too long.
You've got it. The 22nd Amendment was created to prevent exactly that.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. We've really looked at every angle of whether a third Trump term is even possible. We talked about the 22nd Amendment, which is that major obstacle. We explored some pretty out there legal loopholes that, are interesting to think about. We went over the historical precedents, which basically show that the two-term limit has been the norm for a long time. And we talked about the divided public opinion on this whole issue.
And even though the Constitution and history are working against a third term, the fact that Trump is so unconventional and willing to push boundaries keeps this whole question alive.
It's definitely not over yet.
Hmm.
Okay, so here's something for you to think about. What does it even mean that we're having this conversation? What does it say about where American politics is right now that we're seriously considering whether a president could serve a third term? Does it mean we see our fundamental rules as set in stone or as something that can change in extraordinary situations? It's a question that goes beyond just the laws and the history. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
I'm glad you were here.
Yeah.
Until next time.